Hello. It started with a stranger at my front door. It was a Saturday morning, and I was halfway through mowing the lawn when the doorbell rang. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand, annoyed at the interruption. Laura was supposed to be home, but her car was gone. She'd left early, muttering something about errands, and I hadn't thought much of it. When I opened the door, there stood a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, mid-40s maybe, with an expensive-looking blazer and the kind of confident smirk that immediately set me on edge. His dark sunglasses reflected my face back at me, and for a second, I thought I was dealing with a salesman. "Brian, right?" he said, pulling off the glasses and tucking them into his pocket like we were old friends. "Who's asking?" I replied, gripping the edge of the door. He chuckled, a low, mocking sound that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. "Name's Jack. I just wanted to stop by and, thank you." "Thank me for what?" "For keeping Laura busy," he said, and my stomach dropped. The way he said her name made my blood run cold. Like he owned it. Like he owned her. "What the hell are you talking about?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but Jack didn't flinch. "She hasn't told you?" he said, tilting his head with fake sympathy. "I figured you'd know by now. Or maybe she's better at this than I gave her credit for." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Get off my property." "Relax," he said, stepping back with his hands raised. "You deserve to know. Let's just say your wife's been enjoying some extracurricular activities, and I'm the guy who's been grading her performance." Before I could respond, he turned on his heel and strolled back to his car. A sleek black sedan parked across the street. He didn't look back, but I stood there frozen, watching as he drove off, his taillights disappearing around the corner. The world around me blurred, the sound of birds chirping and distant lawnmowers fading into nothing. I didn't even feel the sweat dripping down my back anymore. My wife was cheating on me, and the proof had just stood on my doorstep, grinning like it was the punchline to a bad joke. That night, I couldn't shake the encounter. Every word Jack said replayed in my mind like a stuck record. I had always prided myself on being a man who trusted his gut, but now I wondered if I had been blind. Sitting alone in the dim light of our living room, I went over every detail from the past year. The late nights, the sudden need for privacy, the shift in her tone when she spoke to me. How had I missed it? When Laura came through the door around 10, she acted like nothing had happened. Her purse dangled casually over her arm, and she carried a shopping bag. She glanced at me sitting on the couch, her smile wide but hollow. "Late night?" I asked, my tone even. "Just running errands," she said, not even looking up. Target was packed. Took forever. She tossed her purse onto the counter and began unpacking her bag. Some groceries, a few household items, nothing unusual. She hummed to herself like it was any other day, but all I could see was Jack's smirk. I watched her closely, taking in every detail. The way her eyes darted when she spoke, the quick, dismissive tone. Everything about her felt rehearsed, calculated. "You didn't answer your phone earlier," I said. "Tried calling you around 6. "Oh, did you?" she replied, too casually. "Sorry, I must have had it on silent." I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling to the call log. I called twice. Laura froze for half a second before recovering. "Guess I didn't hear it. You know how noisy Target can get." I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her excuse. Inside, I was seething. She was lying, and she wasn't even trying to hide it well. When she went to bed that night, I stayed up. I poured a drink and sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing. I needed proof, solid, undeniable proof. I wouldn't confront her without it. She'd try to gaslight me, twist it around, make it my fault. Not this time. The next day, I called in a favor from an old friend, Mike. He ran a private investigation agency downtown, and if anyone could get to the bottom of this, it was him. "Brian," Mike said when I walked into his office. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "Wish I wasn't," I replied. "I need your help." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "This about Laura?" I nodded. "Say no more." Mike didn't waste time. Within hours, he had a plan. Cameras, tracking software, the works. "You'll have your answers by the end of the week," he assured me. True to his word, The evidence began rolling in within days. Photos, timestamps, receipts, all painting a picture I didn't want to see. Laura wasn't just cheating. She was doing it brazenly, meeting Jack in broad daylight, using my car to drive to their rendezvous spots. The images Mike sent me told the whole story, her walking arm in arm with Jack into a hotel, laughing like a teenager. By the time Mike handed me the final report, I had all the proof I needed. "Want me to keep digging?" he asked, sliding the envelope across the desk. "No," I said, my voice cold. "I've seen enough." That night, Laura came home late again. She walked through the door like nothing had changed, but this time, I wasn't playing along. "Where were you?" I asked, standing by the counter. She hesitated, just for a moment. "Out with friends. I told you I'd be late." "No, you didn't," I replied. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for some clue of where this was going. "Yes, I did," she insisted, her voice tight. "You didn't," I said again, my tone firm. "But that's not the point, is it?" She looked at me, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into the drawer and pulled out the envelope Mike had given me. I tossed it onto the counter, and the photos spilled out, a damning cascade of evidence. Her face went pale. She didn't say a word at first, just stared at the pictures like they were some foreign object she couldn't comprehend. "You've been lying to me for months," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "No more excuses. No more games. Explain yourself." She blinked, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to form words. Finally, she looked up, her face a mask of defiance. "So what if I have?" she spat. "You think I'm the only one who's been unhappy? You've been too busy with your job, with your stupid hobbies, to even notice me. This wouldn't have happened if you were a better husband." I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "You're blaming me? For your affair?" "Yes," she shot back. "You don't get it, do you? I've been miserable for years, Brian. You're so wrapped up in your own world, you didn't even see it. Jack treats me like I matter. He listens to me. Stop," I said, cutting her off. "You're not going to stand there and justify this. You cheated. You lied. You humiliated me. Don't you dare try to pin this on me." She flinched at my tone but didn't back down. "You don't understand, Brian. You never did. I need more than what you can give me." I shook my head, disgusted. "Then why didn't you leave? Why not end it instead of sneaking around behind my back like a coward?" She had no answer. Instead, she folded her arms across her chest, her defiance crumbling into something closer to resentment. "You wouldn't understand," she muttered. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I understand perfectly. You're selfish. You wanted it all, me, the house, the life we built, and the thrill of someone else on the side. Well, congratulations. You got it. But it ends now." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, the damning photos still spread out on the counter. In that moment, I felt something shift. The man I was before, trusting, forgiving, hopeful, was gone. This wasn't over. Not yet. But it was the beginning of the end. I spent the next 2 days planning the confrontation carefully. Laura moved through the house like a ghost, barely saying a word to me. She avoided eye contact, and when she spoke, her tone was clipped, defensive. I let her have the silence she seemed to want, knowing full well that she was calculating her next move. It wasn't until Wednesday evening that I decided it was time to put everything out in the open. I waited until after dinner, making sure the kids were asleep. I didn't want them to witness what was about to unfold. Laura was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She was always glued to it lately, her thumb scrolling endlessly as if the screen held the answers to her problems. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her for a moment. "We need to talk," I said. She didn't look up. "About what?" "You know what," I replied. That got her attention. She set the phone down slowly, her expression a mix of irritation and unease. "What now, Brian? Haven't you said enough?" I stepped into the room, keeping my tone even but firm. "No, Laura, I haven't. We're going to settle this tonight. No more dodging, no more excuses." She rolled her eyes, leaning back into the couch. "Fine. What do you want to know?" I stayed standing, towering over her. How long have you been seeing him? Her gaze flicked to the side, a brief hesitation that told me she was weighing her answer. It doesn't matter, she said finally. It matters to me, I said. Answer the question. Her jaw tightened. A few months. I nodded. My suspicions confirmed. A few months. While I've been working overtime, taking care of the kids, keeping this house running. You've been out with him. Don't make it sound like that, she snapped. How should I make it sound, Laura? Enlighten me. She stood abruptly, her hands on her hips. I'm not going to sit here and let you judge me. You think you're perfect? You're not. You've been distant for years. You're more married to your job than to me. I took a step closer, refusing to let her deflect. I've been working to provide for this family. Everything you have, everything you've ever wanted, I've made sure you got. And this is how you repay me? Her lips curled into a sneer. Provide? Sure, you pay the bills, but that's not enough, Brian. Do you even know what I want? What I need? You think throwing money at me makes you a good husband? I think being loyal does. I shot back. Her face hardened, and for a moment, we stood there in silence, the tension thick between us. Finally, she broke the stare, brushing past me toward the hallway. Where do you think you're going? I demanded. Anywhere but here, she said over her shoulder. I grabbed her wrist, not hard, but firm enough to stop her. We're not done. She turned back, glaring at me. Let go of me. I did, but I didn't step back. You don't get to walk away from this, Laura. Not after what you've done. What I've done, she said, her voice rising. You want to talk about what I've done? Fine. Let's talk about it. I found someone who actually cares about me. Someone who listens. Someone who makes me feel alive, Brian. And you know what? I don't regret it. Her words hit like a hammer, but I didn't flinch. You don't regret betraying me? Lying to me? To our kids? Her face twisted with defiance. Don't bring the kids into this. They don't need to know. They're going to find out, I said. They're going to know exactly what kind of person their mother is. That's rich, coming from you, she spat. You've been emotionally checked out for years. Don't act like you're some victim here. I shook my head, my patience wearing thin. You can twist it however you want, Laura, but the fact is, you cheated. You made that choice. You didn't come to me. You didn't try to fix things. You just ran off to the first guy who gave you attention. She crossed her arms, her expression icy. You wouldn't have listened. You never listen. Maybe I would have if you'd said something, I countered. But you didn't. You didn't give me the chance. The room fell silent again, the weight of the argument settling over us. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might show even a sliver of remorse. But then she spoke. You're pathetic, Brian, she said coldly, clinging to your self-righteousness like it makes you better than me. Newsflash, it doesn't. I felt my jaw tighten, but I refused to let her bait me. This isn't about being better than you, Laura. This is about respect, about honesty. Two things you clearly don't understand. She laughed bitterly. Oh, please, spare me the lecture. You want honesty? Fine. I don't love you anymore, Brian. I haven't for a long time. I stared at her, the final nail in the coffin. Her words stung, but they also brought a strange sense of clarity. Good to know, I said evenly, because I'm done too. She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. What's that supposed to mean? It means you can pack your things, I said. You don't want to be here? Fine, go. But don't expect any sympathy from me. Her eyes narrowed. You can't kick me out. This is my house too. Not anymore, I said, my voice like steel. You gave up that right the moment you stepped into that hotel with him. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. Instead, she glared at me, her hands clenched into fists. This isn't over, she said finally. Oh, it is, I replied, turning my back on her. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Whatever she had to say, whatever threats she wanted to make, none of it mattered anymore. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The morning after our confrontation, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Laura's betrayal had cracked something inside me, but it had also lit a fire. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. If she wanted to play games, I was ready to show her just how wrong she was to think I'd crumble. I started with the bank accounts. Everything was joint, a mistake I was now determined to correct. After making a few calls, I transferred half of our savings into an account under my name only. It wasn't just about protecting my money. It was about cutting off her access to the life of comfort she had enjoyed while spitting on everything I'd worked for. The next step was the house. I'd bought it before we got married, and my name was the only one on the deed. She might have played the doting wife for years, but legally, she had no claim to it. I called my lawyer, outlining the situation and making it clear that I intended to stay put while ensuring she had no leverage to come back once I forced her out. "You're within your rights," he confirmed. "But prepare yourself. She's not going to go quietly." That was fine by me. I wasn't looking for quiet. By mid-afternoon, I was ready for the next move. I gathered every shred of evidence Mike had collected, photos, timestamps, even receipts from the hotels. Then I drove to Laura's workplace. I wasn't going to humiliate her in front of her coworkers. That wasn't my style. But I did leave the envelope on her desk with a note. "Thought you might want a copy of your greatest hits. Don't bother coming home tonight." After leaving her office, I called the school where our kids attended. I spoke to the principal, explaining the situation in simple terms. Laura and I were separating, and I wanted to make sure any communication about the children came to me directly. She assured me their records would be updated immediately. When I got back to the house, I went through every drawer, closet, and cabinet, packing Laura's belongings into boxes. Jewelry, clothes, shoes. It all went into neatly labeled containers that I stacked by the front door. I even added a note to the top box. "Pick up your things by the weekend. If they're not gone by Sunday night, they'll be at the curb." Around 6, I got a text from Laura. "What the hell is this, Brian?" I didn't reply. She could scream into the void all she wanted. My terms were clear, and I wasn't about to waste another second arguing with her. That evening, I made dinner for the kids as if nothing had happened. They were old enough to sense the tension, but I kept things light, focusing on them and steering the conversation away from anything that might touch on their mother's absence. Later that night, Laura showed up. I heard her car pull into the driveway and open the door before she could knock. She stood there with a mixture of anger and disbelief, glancing at the boxes stacked neatly beside me. "You're insane," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "I'm done." She stepped forward, but I blocked her path. "You're not coming inside, Laura. Not tonight. Not ever. Your things are here. Take them and leave." "You can't do this," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is my house too." "No, it's not," I said, holding up the deed I'd retrieved from the safe. "This house was mine before we got married. It's still mine now." Her eyes darted to the document, then back to me. "You can't just throw me out like this." "Watch me," I replied. For a moment, she just stood there, stunned. Then her expression hardened. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Acting like you're the victim here." "I am the victim," I said coldly. "You betrayed me. You lied to me. And now you want to stand here and lecture me on what's fair? Get out, Laura." She glared at me, but she must have seen something in my eyes that told her I wasn't bluffing. Without another word, she grabbed the top box and stormed back to her car. It took her 3 trips to load everything, and each time she passed me, she muttered something under her breath. I didn't respond. By the time she slammed the trunk closed, the tension in the air was almost suffocating. "You'll regret this," she said as she climbed into the driver's seat. "Not as much as you will," I replied. She backed out of the driveway, her tires squealing as she sped off. I watched her go, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. Over the next few days, I made sure every trace of her was erased from my life. I changed the locks, updated my will, and even got a new phone number. I blocked her on every platform, making it impossible for her to contact me unless it was about the kids, and even then, only through a court-monitored app. I didn't just want her gone. I wanted her to understand that the door was closed, locked, and bolted. For the first time in years, I felt free. Laura didn't pick up the rest of her things until Sunday evening. True to form, she made a scene. She arrived with her phone out, recording as if she thought I'd do something that could make me look bad. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting as she fumbled with one of the boxes. "You know, Brian," she said, her voice dripping with bitterness, "this isn't going to end well for you." "I'll take my chances," I replied. "Need help with that box?" She scowled, setting the phone down for a moment to adjust her grip. "Don't pretend you care. You made your point." "Good," I said, "because I'm done repeating myself." It was the same back and forth we'd had before, but this time, something shifted. When the last box was loaded into her car, she hesitated before getting in. She turned back to face me, her expression almost smug. "You really think you're the one winning here?" she asked. "I don't care about winning, Laura," I said. "I care about living my life without you dragging me down." Her smirk faltered, but she recovered quickly. "You think you're so noble, don't you? But let me tell you something. You're boring, Brian. That's why this happened. Jack showed me what it's like to actually feel alive, and that's something you'll never understand." I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "Let me tell you something. You're a user. You latch onto people, drain them of whatever they have to give, and then toss them aside when you think you've found something better. But here's the thing, Laura. You're not better. You're empty. You'll keep running from one shiny distraction to the next until there's nothing left, and by then, no one will care." She blinked, the words hitting harder than she expected. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. "You're pathetic," she snapped, her voice wavering. "Then leave," I said. "Take your boxes, your insults, and whatever's left of your dignity, and go. You're not welcome here anymore." She stared at me for a moment, then got into her car without another word. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the night. I thought that was the end of it, but Laura wasn't the type to give up easily. The next morning, I got a call from her lawyer. She wanted to negotiate a settlement, claiming she was entitled to a portion of the house and spousal support. "She's out of her mind," I said to my attorney, shaking my head. "The house is mine, and she's perfectly capable of supporting herself." "True," he replied, "but this might still drag out. Are you ready for that?" I nodded. "Absolutely." The legal battle that followed was short but intense. Laura tried every trick in the book, claiming emotional hardship, bringing up the kids as leverage, even accusing me of being neglectful during the marriage. None of it stuck. My lawyer was sharp, and the evidence we had against her was airtight. By the time the court ruled in my favor, Laura looked defeated. She'd lost her claim to the house and wasn't getting a dime in spousal support. All she got was shared custody of the kids, which I agreed to because, despite everything, I wasn't going to keep them from their mother. The final straw came a week later when Laura called me directly. A desperate move, considering I'd blocked her everywhere else. "Brian," she started, her tone unusually soft. "Can we talk?" "We're talking," I said, my voice firm. "In person," she clarified. "There are things I need to say. Please." I considered hanging up, but curiosity got the better of me. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop near downtown. When she arrived, she was dressed to impress, as if she thought appearances might sway me. I didn't acknowledge the effort, keeping my expression neutral as she sat down across from me. "What do you want, Laura?" I asked. She hesitated, fiddling with her coffee cup. "I made a mistake." I didn't respond, waiting for her to continue. "Jack's not who I thought he was," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It didn't work out." "That's not my problem," I said. "I know," she said quickly, "but I wanted to apologize. I was wrong, Brian, about everything. I let myself get caught up in something that didn't matter, and I—" "Stop," I interrupted. "You're not here to apologize. You're here because you think you can undo what's already been done. You want me to forget everything and take you back so you don't have to deal with the consequences of your choices." "That's not true," she said, but the guilt in her eyes told me otherwise. "Yes, it is," I said, "and I'm not interested. You made your decision, Laura, and so did I. We're done." Her face fell, but I didn't waver. "I hope you figure out what you want," I added, standing up, "but it's not going to be with me." I walked out, leaving her sitting there, alone with her regrets. It wasn't the dramatic, emotional scene I'd expected, But it didn't need to be. The chapter was closed, and I felt no need to look back. For the first time in years, I was free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, and the weight of trying to hold together something that was never as solid as I believed. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk. Without her. In the weeks that followed, life shifted into a new rhythm. The legal battles were over, and Laura was out of the house for good. I had taken the necessary steps to ensure that her manipulative tendencies couldn't worm their way back into my life. It was just me, the kids, and a fresh start. Laura, true to form, tried to chip away at my resolve. She would send messages through the court-mandated app, disguised as updates about the kids, but always slipping in a personal jab or thinly veiled plea for sympathy. I never took the bait. Every reply was brief and factual, with no room for her emotional games. One Saturday, she showed up at the soccer game I was attending for our youngest. I was sitting on the bleachers, enjoying the crisp air and the sense of normalcy that had returned to my life. Laura appeared beside me, uninvited, dressed like she was ready for a photo shoot instead of a youth sports event. "Hey, Brian," she said, her tone overly friendly. I didn't even look at her. "If this isn't about the kids, save it." She sighed dramatically, clearly fishing for attention. "I was just trying to be civil." "Then sit quietly and watch the game," I said, still not looking at her. Her expression hardened, but she didn't leave. Instead, she tried another angle. "The kids miss having their family together, you know? They talk about it all the time." "They're fine," I said, finally turning to meet her gaze. "They've adjusted. You should try doing the same." Her lips tightened, but she didn't respond. For the rest of the game, she sat there, fuming silently. When it was over, I walked with the kids to the car, ignoring the daggers she was shooting at my back. Laura's tactics became more desperate after that. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, and sure enough, it was her. "I didn't think you'd pick up," she said, her voice thick with what sounded like fake remorse. "What do you want?" I asked. "I've been thinking," she started. "About us. About everything. I made mistakes, Brian. I see that now." I didn't reply, letting the silence stretch until she continued. "I miss what we had," she said, her tone turning saccharine. "I know I ruined things, but I thought maybe, I don't know, maybe we could try again. For the kids." Her audacity would have been laughable if it weren't so predictable. "No, Laura, we can't, and we won't." "Brian, please," she said, her voice rising in desperation. "I'm serious. I've changed. I realize now that You haven't changed," I cut her off. "You just ran out of options. Jack didn't work out, and now you think you can come crawling back and pretend none of this happened. But it did, Laura. You made your choices, and so did I. We're done." Her voice cracked as she tried to respond, but I didn't wait to hear whatever excuse she was about to make. I hung up and blocked the number. The next day, she sent a message through the court app, accusing me of being cold and unfeeling. I ignored it, as I had done with every other attempt she'd made to drag me back into her mess. What Laura didn't realize was that her manipulations had lost their power. Every word she spoke, every move she made, only reinforced my decision to keep her out of my life. I had spent years bending over backward to accommodate her needs, sacrificing my own happiness to keep the peace. Those days were over. Now, my focus was on rebuilding, on creating a stable, fulfilling life for myself and the kids. I threw myself into my work, earning a promotion within months. I started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in years. I even reconnected with old friends, rebuilding relationships that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. The kids thrived in the new environment. They were happier, more relaxed. They still saw their mother during her scheduled custody days, but it was clear they preferred being at home with me. I made it a point to be there for them in ways I hadn't been able to before, and the bond we built was stronger than ever. As for Laura, she faded into the background of my life. She tried to stir up trouble now and then, complaining about the custody arrangement, making snide remarks about my parenting, but none of it stuck. Her words had no weight anymore. One day, months after our final conversation, I ran into her at the grocery store. She looked different, thinner, more tired. She spotted me from across the aisle and hesitated, as if debating whether to approach. Finally, she walked over, her expression guarded. "Hi, Brian," she said, her voice subdued. I nodded. "Laura, how are you?" she asked, avoiding my eyes. "Fine," I said simply. "You?" She shrugged, forcing a weak smile. "I'm managing." There was an awkward pause before she spoke again. "You look good. Happier." "I am," I replied. She bit her lip, looking like she wanted to say more, but I didn't give her the chance. "Take care, Laura," I said, turning and walking away. That moment marked the true end of our story. She was a chapter in my life, one that had taught me more than I ever wanted to know about betrayal, resilience, and the importance of self-worth. As I walked out of the store, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Laura was part of my past, but my future was mine, and I wasn't going to waste another second looking back. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Bye-bye.